Happy Monday. Thom Hartmann here with you. Wow. You ever heard of Philip Anschutz? I may be mispronouncing his last name. I've never actually heard it, which is how rarely it gets mentioned on the air, or how rarely I watch television. But Phil Anschutz is a billionaire. He inherited, he made his money the old-fashioned way, just like the Koch brothers did. He inherited it from his father. And then he built it into a telecommunications, railroad, real estate, resort, sports team, stadium, movie, and conservative publication empire. According to Charlie Savage and Julie Turkowitz in the New York Times, is the headline, Neil Gorsuch has a web of ties to a secretive billionaire. Neil Gorsuch is going to be, the hearings begin today. Right now, the hearing that is going on is FBI Director Comey and the NSA director, and they're basically trying to nail him down with regard to, is Donald Trump a traitor? Is he owned by the Russians? And, I mean, that's really the ultimate question, right? Do they have something on him? Because nobody can figure out why he would want to have good relations with Russia. And, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, you've got Paul Manafort and others who had connections to Russia early on. So it's providing some interesting grist for the mill. But that's going on right now. And basically the message that Comey's putting forward is, we're not going to tell you. We've got an ongoing investigation. We're not talking. But the other thing that's going to be happening today, and it's going to be happening shortly, is that today is just the opening statements. Neil Gorsuch, whose mother Anne tried to destroy the Environmental Protection Agency and resigned after 3 years in the middle of a scandal in 1983. She was put in there by Ronald Reagan the same way that Scott Pruitt was put in by Donald Trump, specifically an opponent and enemy of the administration, or of the Environmental Protection Agency, excuse me, the agency, to ruin it. And this was when he was in high school. When he was in high school, his high school yearbooks, his slogan was from Henry Kissinger: "The illegal we do immediately, the unconstitutional takes a little longer." Right. What 17-year-olds are thinking like that? Oh, yeah, mommy's in the Reagan administration. So how did Gorsuch become the guy who's going to be on the Supreme Court? Well, it's really interesting. I mean, if you back up a little bit just to the list of people for the court that was put together by the Trump administration. This from a piece by Christopher Kang, K-A-N-G, over at Huffington Post, titled "Gorsuch's Rise Raises Concerns Regarding His Independence." During the presidential campaign, Trump made an unprecedented decision to release a list of Supreme Court finalists. And he outsourced the selection to the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation. They came back with a list of 11 judges, and none of them was Neil Gorsuch. That was in May. Then in September, he came up with another list. This had 10 more names. And guess who's on the list? Judge Gorsuch. In fact, according to the Weekly Standard, which, by the way, is owned by Philip Anschutz, quote, "A main reason for the second list was to put Gorsuch's name on it, but by adding 10 more names, it didn't create a stir or look like favoritism." So what happened in those intervening 4 months? Well, apparently there was an intervention, shall we say. Gorsuch has been the patron, essentially, of this billionaire for apparently most of his life. In January 2006, a top lawyer for Mr. Anschutz sent a letter on the billionaire's behalf to President George W. Bush's White House counsel, Harriet Miers, suggesting that Bush nominate Gorsuch. He did. That's how he got on the federal bench. For nearly a dozen years, Gorsuch was partners in a limited liability company with two of Mr. Anschutz's top lieutenants. Together, they own a 40-acre property on the Colorado River in the mountains northwest of Denver, where they built a vacation home together. Anschutz is 77, by the way. His fortune is estimated to be $12.6 billion. As a lawyer, Charlie Savage and Julie Turkowitz write, as a lawyer at a Washington law firm in the early 2000s, Judge Gorsuch represented Mr. Anschutz, his companies, and lower-ranking business executives as an outside counsel. In 2006, Mr. Anschutz successfully lobbied Colorado's lone Republican senator and the Bush administration to nominate Judge Gorsuch to the federal appeals court. So this is, you know, how to build a career and become a Supreme Court justice. Have a billionaire on your side who repeatedly lobbies multiple administrations from the Reagan administration forward, or the Bush administration forward, to put your young man on the federal bench. And it has worked. And then, you know, what about his judicial rulings? Do they benefit Mr. Anschutz? Well, according to the New York Times, this again from this piece by Savage and Turkowitz, a 2004 case was typical. A teacher's retirement fund that owned shares in the Regal Entertainment Theater chain sued over that chain's decision to issue a debt-financed dividend. In other words, the company, Regal Entertainment, they wanted to borrow money so that they could give that money to their stockholders, which would have included their major stockholder, Philip Anschutz. He owned 58% of the company. So they could give him $368 million. The company decided that they were going to borrow $368 million to give to billionaire Philip Anschutz, and the other stockholders said, hey, wait a minute, and they sued. They said this amounts to self-dealing. Back to the New York Times, Judge Gorsuch helped win a ruling in Regal's favor by arguing that the company could handle the extra debt, telling a judge this company is what some analysts call a cash cow. Right. I mean, it goes on. There's a lot of concerns about Judge Gorsuch. In 2006, when, you know, the Bush administration, Harriet Miers, was lobbied by the Billionaires' colleagues to get on. And this is back to the piece by Christopher Kang in the Huffington Post. In January 2006, there was an opening on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, and on January 10th, 2006, the Denver Post reported that there were 3 finalists, all women. No mention of Gorsuch. This is no surprise. At the time, the 12-member court had only 2 female judges. Colorado had never had a female circuit judge and still doesn't. What is surprising is that 2 days after the Denver Post article, Anschutz's lawyer sent the White House a letter on Anschutz's behalf recommending Gorsuch, and 3 weeks later, Gorsuch was interviewing with the White House counsel. By mid-March, Bush had approved his nomination subject to background clearances. So it's like, you know, and Gorsuch, when he was working for Bush, he developed the talking points to defend the use of torture. In fact, he said, would I approve waterboarding? You bet your ass I would. Verbatim quote from Neil Gorsuch. He was the co-director of Virginia Lawyers for Bush Cheney. In November 2004, he oversaw legal teams in eastern and central Ohio for the Bush-Cheney campaign. This is 2004. This is the one where in Ohio, Ken Blackwell essentially stole the election from John Kerry. You know, poor neighborhoods, black neighborhoods, got no voting machines, or got so few that the lines were 10, 12, 14 hours long. They had over 100,000 spoiled, unmarked, unread ballots. They were marked, unread ballots, unopened ballots, provisional ballots. Huge voter suppression, and the vote was counted on a Republican-controlled server in Kentucky instead of in Ohio. So what did Gorsuch say about this? What a magnificent result for the country. For me personally, the experience was invigorating and a great deal of fun. And Christopher Kang notes the experience for up to 15,000 people unable to vote just in Columbus, Ohio, because lines stretched for hours was probably less invigorating or fun. Right. So here is this guy, you know, riding on his white horse into the Supreme Court, and that horse was provided to him by a billionaire at every step along the way in his legal career. He is, you know, wholly a creation of right-wing conservative America. And I'm just waiting for him to start, you know, taking some of these positions. For example, you know, how is he going to, and he's not going to testify until tomorrow and Wednesday, so it's going to get real interesting tomorrow and Wednesday. Today it's just going to be opening statements by the senators. Every senator gets his, you know, gold star and his or her 15 minutes to pontificate. But Betsy DeVos and Mick Mulvaney both used poor people as their excuse for right-wing policies. Betsy DeVos, oh, you know, we've got poor kids in the inner cities. You know, we want to make sure that they have school choice. right? So we're going to do vouchers and things like that. Well, you know, vouchers don't help poor people, generally speaking, because they're typically not enough to pay for an entire education. And where they are, very often the options are somewhat limited. The main thing that vouchers do is they subsidize upper middle class people who want to send their kids to religious or private schools. That's the principal purpose of vouchers. So Betsy DeVos doesn't acknowledge that. She says, oh, we're trying to help the poor people. Mick Mulvaney, he says, you know, I can't ask a coal miner in West Virginia or a single mother in Detroit to pay for the, well, for a whole bunch of different programs in general, but specifically, what was the program he was talking about? As I recall. Yeah, no, I don't think it was the NEA. It was whatever it was. I don't think it was arts. We'll get into that later, but yeah, it was Meals on Wheels. Thank you. But the fact of the matter is that coal miner and that single mom are not paying for Meals on Wheels to begin with. You know, they're not paying that much in income taxes. If anything, it's the billionaires who are paying for it. And so when Mick Mulvaney and Betsy DeVos and soon-to-be Neil Gorsuch, when they talk about, hey, we're looking out for the little guy, when Donald Trump says in front of his campaign audience, you know, last week in wherever he was, in Maryland, or no, it was in Tennessee, when he says, you know, we're going to cut taxes, and all these middle-class people are cheering, sorry, suckers, you might get $10 out of this. But the billionaires, they're going to get millions, hundreds of millions, because that's what's really going on here. What's really going on here is this is an by and for the billionaires campaign and administration, rather, excuse me. And, you know, whether it's their nominee for the Supreme Court or the billionaires and of the billionaires, right? Whether it's billionaire Betsy DeVos, whether, you know, you name it. This is the billionaire cabinet, the billionaire administration, and the billionaire Republican Party. I'm just continually astonished. I don't know how to say it beyond that, really, by the way that these guys, these people, these so-called conservatives, pitch their whole sales pitch as, well, you know, you're going to take away my money for something I don't like? Well, okay. You and I are average income in the United States, $50,000 a year. Okay, actually, that's not average. That's household income. That's typically with, you know, what, 2.2 people are now working, I think, on average in American households. So probably the average is around $25,000 a year. But the average household around, you know, $44,000, $45,000 a year. If you're making that, then you're paying $575 a year in federal income taxes to support the Pentagon. And Donald Trump wants to raise that. And by about $50, and you're paying $368 in corporate welfare to companies like ExxonMobil and Koch Industries and Walmart. PBS is costing you $1.37. All the federal art programs are costing you 46 cents. All the support for museums, colleges, and libraries is costing you 46 cents. Helping support minority businesses in America, that's costing you 11 cents. I'm talking per year. Supporting entrepreneurship and innovation, it's costing you 66 cents. Community policing, if we did it, if we wanted to go back to Bill Clinton's, you know, put 100,000 cops on the beat, not in the SWAT team, not in the, you know, in their cars, but on the beat, that would cost 88 cents, right? Due process. Do you want to support, you know, attorneys, you know, free legal advice, free attorney services for poor and indigent people? It's a core American value. That costs you $1.55 a year. And someday you may need it, right? Someday, I mean, this is true of all of us. Do we want a civil rights division in the Justice Department? It's costing us 48 cents a year. Do we want to defend Mother Earth? That's costing us 38 cents a year. Do we want to stop climate change? That's costing the average working family in America 3 cents a year. $3 cents a year. But see, when you look at it from the point of view of somebody like Anschutz or the Koch brothers, all of those, I mean, put a whole bunch of zeros behind those numbers. They're probably spending thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands a year in tax dollars to support PBS, to support the arts, to support, working to stop climate change. Oh my God, we can't have that. We've got to have tax cuts for billionaires, right? And we've got to kill these programs. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
By the way, that list was from a tweet by Steve Silberman, Silberman. Check it out on Twitter. We'll be back.